Picture this. You're about to experience life as one of the most feared predators that ever walked the earth. Massive jaws, razor-sharp teeth, lightning speed, and horns that could pierce through bone. Sounds pretty incredible, right? Well, hold that thought, because today we're diving deep into why being born as a Carnotaurus was actually one of nature's cruelest jokes. I'm talking about an existence so brutal, so unforgiving, that it makes modern survival shows look like luxury vacations. This isn't just another dinosaur documentary where we marvel at how awesome these creatures were. No, this is the raw, unfiltered truth about what it really meant to live as a Carnotaurus during the Late Cretaceous period. Here's what blew my mind when I started researching this topic. Despite being one of the fastest and most aggressive predators of their time, Carnotaurus lived in a world that was basically designed to kill them from the moment they hatched. And I'm not talking about the obvious stuff like rival predators or natural disasters. I'm talking about the daily nightmare of simply existing in an ecosystem where everything, and I mean everything, was working against you. By the end of this video series, you'll understand exactly why paleontologists describe the Carnotaurus lifestyle as one of the most challenging survival scenarios in prehistoric history. We'll explore the deadly childhood that claimed most hatchlings, the brutal coming-of-age process that would make boot camp look gentle, and the constant territorial warfare that defined adult life. But first, let me paint you a picture of what your birth would actually look like as a Carnotaurus. Forget everything you think you know about dinosaur babies being cute or protected. Your entrance into the world would be nothing short of terrifying. You emerge from your shell completely helpless, your eyes barely functional, your legs too weak to support your own weight. The first sensation hitting you isn't warmth or comfort. It's the overwhelming smell of decay and blood that permeates the prehistoric forest floor. Your mother, towering above you like a living nightmare, doesn't coo or nurture. She evaluates. Her calculating gaze determines whether you're worth the energy to keep alive. This isn't Disney's version of dinosaur parenting. This is survival of the fittest in its most brutal form. Within hours of hatching, you're already competing with your own siblings for scraps of partially digested meat that your mother regurgitates. Miss your chance, and you starve. Show weakness, and you become prey, not just to outside threats, but potentially to your own family members. The forest around you pulses with danger from every conceivable angle. Above your head, massive flying reptiles circle like vultures, their keen eyes scanning for vulnerable hatchlings. These aerial predators could snatch you up in an instant, and there's absolutely nothing you could do about it. Your stubby little legs can barely carry you across uneven ground, let alone outrun a diving pterosaur. But the threats from above are just the beginning. The ground beneath your feet crawls with smaller predators that view baby Carnotaurus as premium dining. Pack-hunting dinosaurs move through the undergrowth with coordinated precision, their intelligence allowing them to outmaneuver even adult Carnotaurus when they work together. For a helpless hatchling, these creatures represent almost certain death if encountered alone. Then there are the giants. Picture this. You're the size of a small dog, stumbling through vegetation that towers over you like skyscrapers. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking. Through the ferns comes a herd of massive herbivores, each one weighing several tons. They're not malicious. They probably don't even notice you exist. But that doesn't matter when their feet are the size of dinner plates, and they're moving with the unstoppable force of a freight train. Getting trampled by an oblivious herbivore has to be one of the most frustrating ways to die in the prehistoric world. You survive the dangerous hatching process, avoid the aerial predators, escape the pack hunters, only to get accidentally stepped on by a creature that was just trying to reach better vegetation. It's like getting hit by a bus while successfully dodging bullets. Your mother provides some protection, but even she can't be everywhere at once. When she goes hunting, you and your siblings are left to fend for yourselves in a world where everything views you as either food or a threat to eliminate. The stress of constant vigilance at such a young age would be overwhelming for any creature, but for a Carnotaurus hatchling, it's just Tuesday. Speaking of your mother's hunting trips, let's talk about what happens when she actually catches something. You might think this means feast time, but you'd be wrong. Carnotaurus were built for speed and power, not precision killing. When your mother brings down prey, it's rarely a clean kill. More often, it's a violent, chaotic struggle that leaves the victim partially alive and thrashing. As a hatchling, you're expected to feed during this chaos. Imagine trying to eat while your food is still fighting for its life, all while competing with siblings who are just as desperate and hungry as you are. Miss your opportunity because you were too squeamish or too slow, and you don't eat. It's that simple. Natural selection doesn't care about your comfort level with violence. The psychological impact of this feeding process cannot be overstated. From your earliest days, you're conditioned to associate survival with brutality. There's no gentle introduction to the food chain. You're thrown headfirst into a world where hesitation equals death, and compassion is a luxury you literally cannot afford. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of early Carnotaurus life isn't the external threats. It's the realization that your own family members are potential competitors and threats. Sibling rivalry takes on a whole new meaning when resources are scarce and only the strongest survive to adulthood. The bond between siblings is temporary at best, and you quickly learn to view them as future rivals rather than allies. Your mother's protection comes with strings attached. She's not defending you out of love or maternal instinct in the way we might understand it. She's protecting her genetic investment, and that investment only pays off if you prove yourself worthy of survival. Show too much weakness, fall too far behind during travel, or fail to compete effectively for food, and you might find yourself abandoned. This abandonment isn't cruel by Carnotaurus standards, it's practical. In an environment where every calorie counts and every moment of inattention could mean death, supporting a weak offspring that's unlikely to survive to reproductive age is a waste of resources that could be better invested elsewhere. It's cold evolutionary calculus at work. The learning curve for survival skills is impossibly steep. While modern predators might have months or even years to develop hunting techniques, Carnotaurus hatchlings are expected to contribute to their own survival almost immediately. Your first attempts at catching prey are exercises in futility and frustration. Your coordination is terrible, your strength insufficient, and your understanding of predator-prey dynamics virtually non-existent. Yet, failure isn't met with patience and additional teaching opportunities. Failure means going hungry, while your more successful siblings eat their fill. The pressure to improve rapidly is intense, and the consequences of falling behind are immediate and severe. Every day that passes without improvement is a day closer to being left behind or eliminated by natural selection. The forest itself seems designed to test every aspect of your developing abilities. Dense vegetation blocks your vision and muffles sounds, making it impossible to detect approaching threats until they're dangerously close. The uneven terrain trips you up constantly, turning simple movement into an exhausting ordeal. Weather changes can be sudden and severe, forcing you to adapt quickly or face hypothermia, dehydration, or other environmental challenges. Navigation becomes another survival skill you must master quickly. The prehistoric landscape lacks the landmarks and consistent features that might help you find your way. Everything looks similar when you're small and the vegetation towers over you. Getting separated from your mother and siblings, even briefly, could be a death sentence in this hostile environment. As weeks turn into months, the reality of your situation becomes increasingly clear. This isn't a childhood in any recognizable sense. It's an extended trial by fire that will either forge you into an apex predator or eliminate you entirely. The statistics are brutal. The vast majority of Carnotaurus hatchlings never see their first birthday, let alone reach reproductive maturity. The psychological toll of this constant survival pressure shapes every aspect of your developing personality. You become hypervigilant, your nervous system locked in perpetual fight-or-flight mode. Sleep becomes a luxury you can barely afford, as predators are most active during the hours when visibility is poor. Your dreams, when they come, are filled with the sounds of snapping jaws and thundering footsteps. But here's where things get even more twisted. As you grow larger and stronger, you might assume life gets easier. You'd be catastrophically wrong. The juvenile phase of Carnotaurus development introduces entirely new categories of nightmare fuel that make hatchling life look like a peaceful stroll through the park. Your growing size makes you more visible to larger predators who previously ignored you as too small to bother with. Simultaneously, you're still not big enough to defend yourself against serious threats. You exist in this horrible middle ground where you're too large to hide effectively, but too weak to fight back. It's like being a teenager in the worst possible way, all the visibility of an adult with none of the capabilities. Your changing body becomes a source of constant frustration and vulnerability. Your legs grow at different rates than your torso, leaving you awkward and unbalanced. Your developing horns, which will eventually become formidable weapons, start as painful nubs that serve no defensive purpose while making your head heavier and harder to control. Every growth spurt brings new challenges as you struggle to coordinate limbs that seem to change daily. The hunger becomes relentless and maddening. Your growing body demands enormous amounts of protein, but your hunting skills are still developing. You're caught in a vicious cycle where you need successful hunts to fuel your growth. But you need to grow larger and more coordinated to achieve successful hunts. Many juveniles starve during growth spurts, their bodies literally consuming themselves when external food sources prove insufficient. Your mother's patience with your incompetence wears increasingly thin. What little protection she provided during your hatchling days evaporates as she expects you to pull your own weight. Her tolerance for your failures drops to zero, and she'll readily abandon hunting grounds if your clumsiness scares away prey. The message becomes crystal clear: adapt or die, because nobody's going to carry you. Territorial disputes become a constant source of terror. Adult Carnotaurus are notoriously aggressive about their hunting grounds. And as a juvenile, you represent both a potential threat to their resources and an easy target for their frustrations. Encountering an adult male defending his territory is essentially a death sentence. These creatures don't give warnings or second chances. They attack with the full intention of eliminating competition before it becomes a problem. The forest echoes with the territorial roars of adult Carnotaurus, each call a reminder of how precarious your position really is. These sounds carry for miles, advertising the presence of apex predators who view your continued existence as a personal insult. Learning to interpret these vocalizations becomes crucial for survival. Knowing when to flee, when to hide, and when to abandon promising hunting grounds becomes a matter of life and death. Your developing hunting instincts create their own problems. The drive to chase and kill grows stronger daily, but your judgment remains poor. You'll pursue prey that's obviously too large or too dangerous, driven by instincts that haven't yet been tempered by experience. These reckless pursuits often end in injury or exhaustion, leaving you vulnerable to opportunistic predators who follow at a safe distance, waiting for you to make a fatal mistake. The social dynamics of juvenile Carnotaurus life are particularly brutal. Any siblings who survive the hatchling phase become direct competitors for the same resources in the same territory. The bonds that might have existed during early development dissolve into rivalry and eventual hostility. Sharing becomes impossible when every successful hunt means the difference between growth and starvation. Pack hunting species pose an escalating threat as you grow. While they might have ignored you as a hatchling, juvenile Carnotaurus represent a perfect target, large enough to provide substantial meat for the pack, but not yet powerful enough to pose serious danger to experienced hunters working in coordination. These intelligent predators can track you for days, wearing you down through harassment and sleep deprivation before moving in for the kill. The changing seasons bring their own special forms of misery. Dry seasons concentrate both predators and prey around water sources, creating deadly bottlenecks where conflict is inevitable. You're forced to drink from the same rivers as creatures that would happily kill you, creating a daily Russian roulette scenario. Wet seasons bring different challenges: flooded territories, unstable ground, and increased insect-borne diseases that can weaken you when you most need your strength. Your developing senses create their own form of torture. As your eyesight sharpens, you become more aware of the constant threats surrounding you. Enhanced hearing means you're subjected to the terrifying sounds of the forest 24 hours a day, the death screams of prey, the hunting calls of predators, the territorial disputes that could spill over into your area at any moment. Improved smell brings the constant awareness of blood, decay, and the scent markers of dangerous creatures. The learning process for advanced hunting techniques is particularly frustrating. You watch your mother execute perfect ambush attacks, but replicating her techniques with your smaller size and lesser experience proves nearly impossible. The timing required for successful predation is measured in fractions of seconds, and your reaction times are still too slow. Failed hunts don't just mean going hungry. They often alert potential prey to your presence, making future attempts in the same area futile. Weather becomes another enemy. Your developing thermoregulation systems are inconsistent and unreliable. Hot days leave you overheated and sluggish, while cold snaps can send you into a stupor that makes you easy prey. Unlike mammals, you can't simply find shelter and wait out bad weather. You still need to hunt, still need to defend territory, still need to remain constantly vigilant, regardless of environmental conditions. The psychological pressure of knowing that most juveniles don't survive to adulthood weighs heavily on your developing mind. You're surrounded by evidence of failure, bones of juvenile Carnotaurus who didn't make it, abandoned territories where young predators once tried to establish themselves, and the conspicuous absence of others your age in the surrounding forest. The statistics aren't abstract concepts. They're your daily reality. Your first serious injury becomes a pivotal moment that determines whether you'll join the ranks of successful adults or become another statistic. Unlike modern animals with veterinary care and safe recovery spaces, an injured juvenile Carnotaurus faces a cascade of potentially fatal complications. Reduced mobility makes hunting nearly impossible. Open wounds attract scavengers and signal weakness to larger predators. Infection can set in quickly in the humid forest environment, and there's no medical intervention available. The recovery process from injury tests every survival skill you've developed. You must find ways to hunt that accommodate your limitations, locate safe spaces for extended rest, and maintain territorial defenses while operating at reduced capacity. Many juveniles who survive their initial injuries ultimately succumb to secondary complications or predation during their vulnerable recovery period. As you approach sexual maturity, new challenges emerge that make everything you've endured seem like preparation for the main event. The hormonal changes flooding your system affect your judgment, making you more aggressive, but also more reckless. Your body demands even more resources to fuel final growth spurts and the development of adult characteristics, but your hunting territory remains the same size. The transition from juvenile to adult isn't marked by celebration or recognition. It's marked by the sudden withdrawal of any remaining tolerance from adult Carnotaurus in the area. Overnight, you transform from a struggling juvenile who might occasionally be ignored into a direct competitor who must be eliminated or driven away. The forest that was merely hostile during your youth becomes actively murderous, as you approach adulthood. The brutal irony of reaching sexual maturity as a Carnotaurus is that your body finally becomes capable of everything you've dreamed of, just as the world decides you're too dangerous to exist. Your muscles have filled out beneath scarred hide, your horns have sharpened into deadly weapons, and your legs can propel you at speeds that would terrify smaller predators. Yet this physical peak marks the beginning of your most dangerous phase yet. Territory acquisition becomes your first adult nightmare. Every square mile of decent hunting ground is already claimed by established Carnotaurus, who've survived their own brutal journeys to adulthood. These aren't reasonable neighbors willing to negotiate boundaries. They're battle-scarred veterans who view your presence as a direct challenge to their survival. The established territorial system leaves no room for newcomers, creating a zero-sum game where your success requires someone else's failure. Your first territorial challenge arrives faster than you'd prefer. An older male, his hide cross-hatched with scars from decades of conflicts, spots you hunting near the edge of his domain. He doesn't issue warnings or establish clear boundaries. He charges with the full intention of killing you before you become a larger threat. The fight that follows isn't the noble combat you might imagine from nature documentaries. It's a vicious, desperate struggle where both participants understand that retreat likely means starvation. The physical damage from territorial disputes accumulates quickly. Even victories leave you wounded, exhausted, and vulnerable to opportunistic attacks from other predators who've been waiting for exactly this moment. Your body bears the permanent marks of each conflict: broken ribs that never quite heal properly, deep gashes that become infected in the humid forest air, and damaged joints that ache with every movement. Each battle victory comes at a cost that reduces your chances in future encounters. Establishing hunting grounds requires more than just winning fights. It demands constant patrolling and marking to maintain your claim. The energy expenditure is enormous. You must regularly traverse your entire territory, leaving scent markers and checking for signs of intrusion, all while hunting enough to sustain your massive caloric requirements. The mathematics of territorial maintenance often don't add up, forcing many young adults into smaller, less productive areas where starvation becomes a constant threat. The loneliness of adult Carnotaurus life hits you like a physical blow. Gone are the days when siblings provided companionship, however temporary and competitive. Your species' solitary nature means you might go months without encountering another of your kind, and when you do, the meeting is more likely to result in violence than social interaction. The psychological isolation weighs heavily on a brain that evolved for complex social calculations, now forced to exist in perpetual solitude. Hunting transforms from the clumsy attempts of youth into a refined but increasingly dangerous art form. Your prey has grown larger and more formidable. Adult herbivores with devastating defensive weapons and herd protection strategies. A single miscalculation during an attack on an armored ankylosaur can result in a crushing blow that ends your hunting career permanently. The margin for error shrinks to nothing as both predator and prey reach their physical peaks. The seasonal migrations of prey herds create feast or famine cycles that test your resource management skills. During abundance, you must hunt enough to build fat reserves for leaner times. During scarcity, you're forced into increasingly desperate tactics, pursuing dangerous prey, venturing into territories claimed by other predators, or attempting to scavenge from kills made by more successful hunters. Each season brings its own survival equation that must be solved perfectly or face the consequences. Your developing hunting techniques require constant refinement as prey species adapt to your strategies. The herbivores you've been successfully hunting learn to recognize your approach patterns and adjust their behavior accordingly. Herd animals post more sentries, grazing patterns shift to avoid your preferred ambush sites, and migration routes change to minimize exposure to known predator territories. You're locked in an evolutionary arms race where standing still means falling behind. The mating drive introduces complications that threaten to override your carefully honed survival instincts. The scent of a receptive female can draw you away from familiar hunting grounds into unknown territories where other males have already gathered. Competition for mating rights creates temporary but incredibly intense conflicts where the stakes go beyond territorial disputes to genetic legacy itself. These battles are fought with a desperation that makes territorial conflicts seem restrained by comparison. Courtship displays require enormous energy expenditures at precisely the time when you can least afford them. Demonstrating your fitness through elaborate shows of strength and agility depletes the reserves you need for actual survival tasks. Failed courtship attempts not only waste precious resources, but also advertise your location to rivals who might decide to eliminate competition while you're exhausted from displaying. Successfully attracting a mate brings temporary partnership, but also shared vulnerability. Protecting nest sites divides your attention between hunting for increased food requirements and defending against threats that specifically target breeding pairs. The eggs represent both genetic success and a massive liability. They cannot be moved or abandoned, creating a fixed defensive position that other predators learn to exploit. The brief period of cooperative hunting with a mate offers tantalizing glimpses of what life might be like with reliable partnership, making the inevitable return to solitude even more psychologically challenging. These temporary alliances demonstrate your species' capacity for coordination, while highlighting how unnatural and stressful the enforced isolation of adult life really becomes. The contrast between cooperative success and solitary struggle creates an emotional whiplash that affects decision-making long after the partnership ends. Parental responsibilities extend beyond simple nest defense to active teaching of survival skills to offspring, despite your own precarious position in the ecosystem. You must somehow communicate decades of hard-won survival knowledge to creatures whose attention spans are measured in minutes and whose primary concern is avoiding becoming someone else's meal. The frustration of watching young ones repeat mistakes you've learned to avoid becomes a daily source of stress. The energy demands of raising offspring while maintaining territorial defenses push your physical limits to breaking points. Sleep becomes an impossible luxury when nest sites require constant vigilance. Hunting efficiency decreases as you're forced to stay within defensive range of vulnerable young. The mathematical impossibility of meeting all these demands simultaneously explains why so few Carnotaurus successfully reproduce multiple times. Weather patterns become existential threats rather than mere inconveniences. Extended droughts concentrate all the area's predators around shrinking water sources, creating unavoidable conflict zones where violence is inevitable. Flooding seasons wash away scent markers and territorial boundaries, forcing you to re-establish claims while competing with displaced rivals who've lost their own territories. Storm systems can destroy weeks of careful territorial maintenance in a single night. The forest's changing composition over years and decades requires constant adaptation of hunting strategies. Evolving plant communities alter prey distribution patterns, forcing you to learn new stalking routes and ambush positions. Climate shifts affect the timing of migrations and breeding cycles, disrupting the natural rhythms you've learned to exploit. Your hard-won territorial knowledge becomes obsolete, requiring you to essentially relearn your environment while competing with others undergoing the same process. Injuries accumulate faster than they heal as the years pass. The hyperactive lifestyle required for territorial maintenance and successful hunting takes a cumulative toll on joints, muscles, and organs that evolved for shorter lifespans. Chronic pain becomes a constant companion that affects hunting accuracy, territorial patrol efficiency, and reaction times during conflicts. The body that once seemed invincible gradually betrays you in increasingly obvious ways. Younger competitors arrive with advantages you no longer possess: faster reflexes, greater endurance, and fewer accumulated injuries. Each new generation represents a fresh challenge to your established position, and the mathematics of aging work against you in every encounter. The territorial system that once favored experience begins to favor physical capability as your own abilities decline relative to emerging threats. The psychological weight of constant vigilance without hope of permanent security creates a form of chronic stress that affects every aspect of your existence. Sleep, when it comes, offers no real rest because your subconscious mind continues processing threats and planning responses. Digestive efficiency decreases under constant stress hormones, meaning you extract less nutrition from successful kills while burning more calories through anxiety and hypervigilance. Social isolation compounds every other challenge you face. There's no knowledge sharing, no cooperative problem solving, no emotional support during particularly difficult periods. Every solution must be discovered independently. Every mistake bears full consequences without the buffer of group protection, and every success brings only temporary relief before the next challenge emerges. The absence of social bonds that might provide meaning or purpose reduces existence to mere survival mathematics. The realization gradually dawns that this is not a temporary difficult phase to be endured until better times arrive. This is simply what adult Carnotaurus life consists of. There's no retirement, no period of reduced responsibility, no safe haven where the pressures ease. The intensity you're experiencing represents the baseline standard that must be maintained until death provides the only available escape from the relentless demands of existence. Your territory, if successfully maintained, becomes both your greatest achievement and your ultimate prison. The boundaries you fought to establish must be defended indefinitely against an endless stream of challengers who grow more capable while you grow more vulnerable. Success in territorial establishment guarantees nothing except the opportunity to repeat the same exhausting cycle until someone stronger takes your place. The hunting grounds you've learned so intimately become predictable to both prey and competing predators, reducing their effectiveness over time. Prey species adapt their behavior patterns to account for your known preferences and capabilities. Other predators learn to exploit the territories you've cleared of competition, forcing you into increasingly marginal areas where successful hunts become more difficult and dangerous. Resource depletion within your territory creates impossible choices between maintaining claim to familiar ground or abandoning your life's work to seek better hunting elsewhere. Moving to new territory means starting the entire territorial establishment process over again, but with reduced physical capabilities and increased competition from younger, stronger rivals who've been waiting for exactly this opportunity. The breeding imperative conflicts directly with survival necessities in ways that become more apparent with each passing season. Successful reproduction requires resources and attention that directly compromise your ability to maintain territorial defenses and hunting efficiency. Failed reproduction means you've wasted irreplaceable energy and time while gaining nothing to show for the investment except increased vulnerability. Your body's maintenance requirements increase, even as your ability to meet them decreases. Healing takes longer, recovery from exertion requires more rest, and the cumulative effects of minor injuries begin significantly impacting your hunting effectiveness. The physical peak that marked early adulthood becomes a fading memory as each year brings new limitations and reduced capabilities. The knowledge and experience you've accumulated through surviving countless challenges becomes increasingly irrelevant as environmental conditions change and new threats emerge. Younger competitors arrive with innate advantages that your hard-won experience cannot overcome, making your survival skills less valuable precisely when you need them most. The expertise that kept you alive begins losing its protective power against fresh challenges. Weather extremes that you once weathered relatively easily now pose serious threats to your compromised physical condition. Temperature fluctuations affect your already strained thermoregulation systems. Seasonal food shortages impact your reduced hunting efficiency more severely, and storm damage to your territory becomes harder to repair with diminished energy reserves. The forest around you continues evolving, while your ability to adapt to changes diminishes with age and accumulated stress. New predator species establish themselves in your ecosystem. Prey animals develop more sophisticated avoidance strategies, and plant communities shift in ways that alter the fundamental hunting landscape you've spent decades learning to navigate. Competition from your own offspring adds another layer of complexity to an already impossible survival equation. The young Carnotaurus you've successfully raised to independence now require their own territories, and the most accessible options are portions of the domain you've spent your life defending. Teaching them survival skills ultimately means training your own future competition for the resources you still need. The gradual realization emerges that every day survived simply brings you closer to inevitable defeat by younger, stronger competitors who possess all your survival knowledge plus physical advantages you no longer have. Success becomes measured not in achievements gained, but in disasters avoided, victories prevented rather than battles won, and time purchased rather than progress made. Your legacy, if any exists, consists entirely of the brief moments when your offspring survived long enough to face their own impossible challenges in the same unforgiving ecosystem. The knowledge you've accumulated dies with you. The territory you've defended returns to contested status, and the cycle begins again with fresh participants who must learn every lesson independently through their own suffering and losses. The mathematical certainty of eventual failure hangs over every decision and action, creating a psychological burden that grows heavier with each passing season. You continue fighting not because victory is possible, but because the alternative is immediate death rather than the delayed defeat that awaits regardless of your efforts. The difference between giving up now and persisting becomes purely a matter of when, not if, the inevitable conclusion arrives. Yet, somehow, despite understanding the hopelessness of your situation, some deep survival drive continues pushing you forward into each new day's challenges. Whether this represents courage, instinct, or simple biological programming becomes irrelevant when facing the daily reality of existence in a world designed to eliminate you through 1,000 different forms of suffering and struggle. The forest whispers secrets you've learned to interpret through years of desperate listening. Every rustle carries meaning, the difference between approaching prey and stalking death. Your ears have become instruments of survival, tuned to frequencies that spell the difference between your next meal and becoming someone else's. The symphony of the prehistoric world plays constantly around you, and missing a single note could cost everything you fought to preserve. Scent trails weave invisible highways through your territory, carrying intelligence more valuable than gold. The musk of a rival male 3 days old tells you exactly how much time you have before another territorial challenge arrives. The fear pheromones of wounded prey guide you toward opportunities, while the territorial markers of pack hunters warn you away from areas where coordinated death waits patiently. Your nostrils have become survival computers, processing thousands of chemical messages that determine your next move. The night brings its own special torture. Darkness amplifies every sound, transforms familiar territories into alien landscapes filled with unseen threats. Your vision, perfectly adapted for daylight hunting, becomes a liability when shadows merge into impenetrable walls of uncertainty. Sleep remains elusive because the forest never sleeps. Somewhere in the darkness, something is always hunting, always moving, always planning your destruction. Your dreams, when exhaustion finally claims you, replay the day's near misses and failed hunts in endless loops of frustration. The herbivore that spotted you a fraction too soon, the territorial dispute that left you limping for weeks, the mating opportunity lost to a younger, stronger rival. Even unconsciousness provides no escape from the relentless pressure of existence in a world that measures your worth in terms of meat consumed and territory defended. Dawn arrives with fresh anxiety rather than relief. Each new day presents the same impossible equation. Consume enough calories to fuel your massive frame while avoiding the countless threats that view you as either competition or opportunity. The mathematics never balance in your favor. Energy expenditure always threatens to exceed energy intake, creating a deficit that accumulates like compound interest on a debt you can never fully repay. Your hunting patterns have become predictable through necessity, but predictability equals vulnerability in an ecosystem where adaptation determines survival. The same ambush points that served you well last season now attract the attention of prey animals who've learned to avoid your preferred tactics. Innovation becomes mandatory, but experimentation carries risks you can barely afford. Every new hunting strategy represents a gamble with your life as the stakes. The seasonal cycles mock your attempts at long-term planning. Abundance periods trick you into believing you've achieved some measure of security, only to vanish overnight when migration patterns shift or weather patterns change. Scarcity periods arrive with mathematical precision, finding you inevitably unprepared despite years of experience with their devastating effects. The forest's bounty operates on schedules that ignore your survival requirements entirely. Your body has become a collection of accumulated damage held together by stubbornness and desperation. Old wounds ache with weather changes, serving as natural barometers that predict storms with painful accuracy. Joints creak under the constant stress of high-impact hunting and territorial defense. Muscles that once rippled with power now carry permanent knots of tension that never fully release. The vehicle that carries your consciousness through this hostile world deteriorates with each passing season. Digestion becomes increasingly problematic as stress hormones interfere with your body's ability to process food efficiently. The kills you manage to secure provide less nutrition than they should, forcing you to hunt more frequently to maintain the same energy levels. This creates a vicious cycle where increased hunting exposure elevates your risk profile while your physical condition simultaneously deteriorates from the additional stress. Temperature regulation failures add another layer of misery to an already overwhelming survival challenge. Hot days leave you panting and sluggish when you most need speed and agility. Cold snaps sap your strength and slow your reflexes to dangerous levels. Your internal thermostat, once reliable, becomes erratic under the constant pressure of chronic stress and accumulated physical damage. The forest floor tells stories of failure wherever you look. Bleached bones mark the final resting places of Carnotaurus, who couldn't maintain the impossible standards required for survival. Abandoned territorial markers fade slowly, silent monuments to dreams of dominance that ended in death or exile. The evidence surrounds you constantly, serving as reminders that your own story will likely follow the same tragic arc. Rival predators circle your territory like vultures, waiting for signs of weakness that will signal their opportunity to move in. They've learned patience from observing your struggles, understanding that time works in their favor while working against yours. These opportunistic hunters don't need to defeat you in direct combat. They simply need to outlast your declining capabilities and claim the resources you can no longer defend. Your reflection in still water reveals changes you try to ignore. The sleek predator who once moved with fluid grace has been replaced by a scarred veteran whose every movement betrays the accumulated cost of survival. Eyes that once burned with predatory fire now carry the hollow look of someone who has seen too much death and understands their own mortality with crystalline clarity. Mental fatigue compounds physical exhaustion in ways that make both problems exponentially worse. Decision-making becomes clouded by the constant stress of life-or-death choices. Risk assessment abilities deteriorate under the pressure of making perfect calculations while operating on insufficient sleep and chronic malnutrition. The cognitive tools you need most become least reliable precisely when you need them most desperately. Social isolation creates psychological wounds that fester without hope of healing. The absence of any meaningful connection with your own kind leaves you emotionally starved in ways that physical hunger cannot match. Conversations exist only in your imagination. Companionship becomes a half-remembered dream from juvenile days, and the fundamental social needs that evolution built into your brain remain forever unmet. Your territorial boundaries require constant maintenance even as your ability to patrol them effectively diminishes. Scent marking becomes a Sisyphean task, endless repetition of activities that provide only temporary security before requiring repetition again. The energy expenditure involved in maintaining territorial claims grows larger relative to your declining energy reserves, creating mathematical impossibilities that have no satisfactory solutions. Prey animals adapt their behavior patterns specifically to counter your hunting strategies, creating an evolutionary arms race where you're always playing catch-up. Herd animals post additional sentries in areas where you've had previous success. Migration routes shift to avoid your established hunting grounds. Feeding schedules change to minimize exposure during your most active hunting periods. Your very success breeds the conditions for future failure. The breeding imperative creates internal conflicts that tear at your sanity. Genetic programming demands that you seek mates and produce offspring, but rational survival calculations clearly demonstrate that reproduction attempts will likely result in your death. The drive to continue your genetic line wars constantly with the knowledge that mating displays and nest defense will exhaust resources you need for personal survival. Weather becomes your enemy in ways beyond simple discomfort. Storms destroy carefully maintained scent markers and territorial boundaries, forcing you to invest precious energy in re-establishing claims while competing with other displaced predators. Droughts Concentrate all predators around shrinking water sources, creating unavoidable conflict zones where violence becomes mathematically inevitable. Flooding seasons wash away hunting trails and ambush sites, obsoleting years of accumulated local knowledge. Your hunting accuracy declines as accumulated injuries affect depth perception, reaction times, and coordination between different muscle groups. Prey that would have been easy kills during your prime now represent significant challenges that carry high risk of further injury. The margin for error in hunting calculations shrinks to nothing, while the consequences of failure grow more severe with each missed opportunity. Night terrors plague what little sleep you manage to achieve. Dreams filled with pursuing predators, failed hunts, and territorial defeats leave you more exhausted upon waking than when you first closed your eyes. The subconscious mind, designed to process and integrate daily experiences, becomes overwhelmed by the constant stream of life-threatening encounters and survival decisions that define your existence. Your territory, once a source of pride and security, transforms into a prison that you're simultaneously desperate to defend and longing to escape. The boundaries you fought so hard to establish now feel like chains binding you to a piece of land that may no longer provide adequate resources for survival. Moving means abandoning your life's work, but staying means slowly starving in familiar surroundings. Competing with your own offspring for resources creates psychological conflicts that evolution never adequately prepared you to handle. The young Carnotaurus you successfully raised to independence now require territories of their own, and the most logical expansion areas are portions of the domain you still need for personal survival. Success as a parent directly threatens your continued existence as an individual. The knowledge you've accumulated through decades of survival becomes increasingly irrelevant as environmental conditions change and new challenges emerge. Expertise in hunting techniques becomes obsolete when prey species evolve new defensive strategies. Territorial knowledge becomes worthless when climate shifts alter migration patterns and resource distribution. The wisdom that kept you alive begins losing its protective power against fresh threats. Your body's healing capacity diminishes even as the frequency of injuries increases. Minor cuts that once closed within days now remain open for weeks, providing entry points for infections that sap your strength. Muscle strains that previously resolved with rest now become permanent limitations that affect hunting performance. The biological repair systems you've always taken for granted begin failing when you need them most desperately. Chronic pain becomes a constant companion that affects every aspect of your existence. Old injuries ache with the weather changes, recent wounds throb with each movement, and overused muscles cramp unpredictably during crucial hunting moments. The cumulative effect creates a background of suffering that clouds judgment, slows reactions, and reduces the joy of successful kills to mere temporary relief from discomfort. Your memory, once sharp enough to catalog every detail of your hunting grounds, begins showing gaps and inconsistencies that could prove fatal. Forgetting the location of a rival's territorial boundary means accidentally triggering conflicts you're no longer equipped to win. Misremembering the behavioral patterns of prey species leads to failed hunts and wasted energy. The cognitive tools that enabled your survival start betraying you when you need them most. The forest around you continues evolving while your ability to adapt diminishes with age and accumulated stress. New predator species establish themselves in your ecosystem, bringing hunting strategies you've never encountered. Plant communities shift in response to climate changes, altering the fundamental landscape you've spent your life learning to navigate. The world changes while your capacity for change atrophies through exhaustion and injury. Seasonal food shortages hit you harder each year as your hunting efficiency declines and your metabolic requirements remain constant. The fat reserves that once carried you through lean periods become impossible to accumulate when successful hunts grow increasingly rare. Starvation becomes a creeping presence that weakens you gradually, making each subsequent hunt more difficult and less likely to succeed. Your territorial displays lose their intimidating effect as physical decline becomes obvious to potential challengers. The roars that once warned rivals away from your boundaries now sound hollow and desperate to ears trained to detect weakness. Scent markers carry chemical signatures that advertise your declining health to any predator capable of interpreting the information correctly. The mathematics of survival become increasingly unfavorable with each passing season. Energy expenditure grows as hunting becomes more difficult, while energy intake decreases due to reduced hunting success. Territory maintenance requires more effort as boundaries come under constant pressure from opportunistic rivals. The equation balances only through borrowing against future capacity that may not exist. Your reflection in a still water becomes harder to recognize as the scarred, exhausted creature staring back bears little resemblance to the powerful predator you remember being. The transformation happens gradually, but the cumulative effect is shocking when observed honestly. Time has become your enemy in ways that no amount of skill or determination can overcome. Pack hunters begin viewing you as potential prey rather than competition to avoid, a shift in perception that fundamentally alters the strategic landscape of your territory. Species that once gave you respectful distance now calculate whether coordinated attacks might succeed against your diminished capabilities. The respect your presence once commanded evaporates as weakness becomes apparent to intelligent predators. Your hunting grounds require constant defense against encroachment from multiple directions, but your ability to patrol effectively diminishes while threats multiply. Younger predators test your boundaries with increasing boldness, probing for signs that your decline has reached the point where direct challenges might succeed. The territory that represents your life's work becomes a burden you can barely carry. Environmental changes accelerate beyond your ability to adapt, creating challenges that have no precedent in your accumulated experience. Climate shifts alter prey migration patterns in ways your territorial strategy cannot accommodate. New plant growth changes the landscape sightlines and scent trail patterns, obsoleting decades of accumulated hunting knowledge. The world transforms around you while your capacity for transformation atrophies. The breeding cycle approaches with cruel irony, triggering biological drives that rational assessment clearly indicates you cannot fulfill. Hormonal changes cloud judgment precisely when clear thinking becomes most crucial for survival. The imperative to reproduce conflicts directly with the reality that mating attempts will likely accelerate your decline and death. Your legacy, such as it exists, will consist entirely of the brief period when your offspring survive long enough to face their own impossible challenges in the same unforgiving ecosystem. The knowledge you've accumulated through suffering will die with you. The territory you've defended will return to contested status, and the cycle will begin again with fresh participants who must learn every lesson independently. The realization crystallizes that you are not experiencing a temporary difficult phase that will eventually improve. This is simply what existence consists of for your species. There is no retirement, no period of reduced pressure, no safe haven where the demands ease. The intensity you're experiencing represents the baseline standard that must be maintained until death provides the only available escape. Your body betrays you in new ways each morning, presenting fresh limitations and sources of pain that must be incorporated into survival calculations already stretched beyond sustainability. Joints that once moved smoothly now grind bone against bone. Muscles that once responded instantly to commands now require conscious effort to coordinate properly. The biological machine that carries your consciousness through this hostile world deteriorates beyond any hope of repair. Yet, despite understanding the mathematical certainty of your eventual defeat, some primal drive continues pushing you forward into each new day's impossible challenges. Whether this represents courage, instinct, or simple biological programming becomes irrelevant when facing the reality of existence in a world that has been systematically designed by millions of years of evolution to test every aspect of your being beyond the breaking point. The forest continues its ancient rhythms around you, indifferent to your struggles and unconcerned with your survival. Somewhere in the distance, fresh eggs are hatching, beginning the cycle anew with creatures who will face the same impossible challenges you've endured. The wheel turns regardless of individual suffering, grinding forward with mechanical precision that reduces your entire existence to a single data point in an experiment that has no conclusion. The forest floor beneath your feet tells a story written in blood and bone. Each step carries you across the remains of countless others who shared your fate. Predators who once ruled these same hunting grounds with the same desperate determination that now drives your every movement. Their scattered remains serve as mile markers on a journey that has no destination except the inevitable conclusion that awaits all who dare to claim dominance in this merciless wilderness. Your stomach gnaws at itself with a hunger that transcends mere appetite. The metabolic demands of your massive frame require constant feeding, but the energy expenditure of hunting often exceeds the caloric value of successful kills. This biological mathematics creates an impossible equation where survival requires more resources than the environment can sustainably provide. Each meal becomes a temporary reprieve from starvation rather than genuine nourishment. The scent of your own fear mingles with the territorial markers you leave behind, creating a chemical signature that advertises vulnerability to every predator capable of interpreting the information. Your body betrays your psychological state through pheromone releases that cannot be consciously controlled, broadcasting weakness to intelligent hunters who track such signals like bloodhounds following a trail of desperation. Rival males circle your territory with the patience of vultures, understanding that time works in their favor while working against yours. They observe from safe distances, cataloging your hunting failures and noting the increasing frequency of your rest periods. These opportunistic challenges don't need to defeat you in direct combat. They simply need to outlast your declining capabilities and claim the resources you can no longer adequately defend. Your reflection in muddy pools reveals changes you desperately try to ignore. The proud bearing that once marked you as an apex predator has given way to the cautious posture of prey. Your movements carry the hesitation of someone who has learned that confidence can be fatal, that boldness leads to injury, and that survival requires the constant calculation of risk versus reward in scenarios where both options often lead to disaster. The forest canopy above filters sunlight into dappled patterns that shift constantly, creating a kaleidoscope of shadows and illumination that plays tricks on your aging eyes. Depth perception becomes unreliable when you most need accuracy. The visual system that once allowed you to track fast-moving prey with deadly precision now struggles to distinguish between moving foliage and potential targets, leading to wasted energy on phantom hunts. Sleep becomes a luxury you cannot afford, yet exhaustion clouds your judgment when clear thinking becomes most crucial for survival. The forest never rests. Somewhere in the darkness, something is always hunting, always moving, always calculating your destruction. Rest periods must be measured in minutes rather than hours, creating a sleep debt that accumulates like compound interest on an obligation you can never fully repay. Your hunting techniques, once varied and adaptable, narrow to a few reliable patterns that prey species learn to anticipate and avoid. Innovation requires experimentation, but experimentation carries risks that your declining physical condition cannot absorb. The same strategies that brought success in your prime now yield diminishing returns. As intended, victims adapt their behavior to counter your predictable approaches. Territorial boundaries blur as your ability to patrol effectively diminishes, while pressure from challengers increases exponentially. Scent markers fade faster than you can refresh them, creating gaps in your defensive perimeter that opportunistic rivals exploit with surgical precision. The domain you fought to establish becomes a burden that drains resources without providing adequate protection or hunting opportunities. The mathematics of territorial defense reveal their impossible nature through brutal clarity. Energy expenditure required for boundary maintenance exceeds energy intake from successful hunts within the defended area. This creates a downward spiral where territorial losses reduce hunting grounds, which reduces successful kills, which reduces energy available for territorial defense, which accelerates further territorial losses in an accelerating cycle of decline. Your body processes food less efficiently as chronic stress hormones interfere with digestive systems evolved for periodic feast and famine cycles rather than constant nutritional deficit. The kills you manage to secure provide decreasing nutritional value, forcing you to hunt more frequently while your success rate simultaneously declines. This metabolic trap ensures that increased effort yields reduced results. Weather patterns become existential threats rather than environmental challenges to be endured. Extended droughts concentrate all predators around shrinking water sources, creating conflict zones where violence becomes mathematically inevitable. Storm systems destroy territorial markers and hunting trails, obsoleting years of accumulated knowledge while forcing competition with displaced rivals who have lost their own domains. The night brings amplified terror as darkness transforms familiar territories into alien landscapes filled with unseen threats. Your vision, perfectly adapted for daylight hunting, becomes a liability when shadows merge into impenetrable walls of uncertainty. Every sound carries potential doom. Every movement might signal approaching death, and every moment of inattention could prove fatal. Your dreams replay the day's failures in endless loops of frustration and self-recrimination. The prey that detected your approach a heartbeat too soon. The territorial challenge that left you bleeding and limping. The mating opportunity lost to a younger, stronger competitor. Even unconsciousness provides no escape from the relentless pressure of existence in a world that measures worth solely in terms of meat consumed and territory defended. Dawn arrives with fresh anxiety rather than hope for improvement. Each new day presents identical, impossible equations that must be solved perfectly or face consequences that compound previous failures. The accumulated weight of countless near misses and narrow escapes creates psychological pressure that affects decision-making when clear thinking becomes most desperately needed. Your hunting accuracy deteriorates as accumulated injuries affect coordination between muscle groups that must function in perfect synchronization for successful kills. Depth perception failures lead to mistimed attacks that alert prey to your presence while wasting precious energy reserves. The margin for error shrinks to nothing, while consequences of failure grow more severe with each missed opportunity. Competing predators adapt their strategies specifically to exploit your declining capabilities, creating tactical scenarios that have no satisfactory solutions. Pack hunters coordinate attacks timed to your predictable rest periods. Solitary predators shadow your movements, waiting for signs of weakness that will signal their opportunity to claim your territory. The intelligence of your enemies grows more apparent as your own faculties diminish. Your offspring, successfully raised to independence, now represent direct competition for resources within territories that cannot support multiple apex predators. The young Carnotaurus you taught survival skills now use that knowledge to challenge your continued dominance in areas you still need for personal survival. Success as a parent directly threatens your existence as an individual in ways evolution never adequately prepared you to handle. The forest around you continues evolving while your capacity for adaptation atrophies through exhaustion and accumulated damage. New predator species establish themselves with hunting strategies you've never encountered. Climate shifts alter migration patterns and resource distribution in ways your territorial knowledge cannot accommodate. Environmental changes accelerate beyond your ability to incorporate them into survival calculations. Your body's repair systems fail when you need them most desperately. Minor injuries that once healed within days now remain open for weeks, providing entry points for infections that sap strength needed for hunting and territorial defense. Muscle strains that previously resolved with brief rest now become permanent limitations that affect every aspect of physical performance. Chronic pain becomes a constant companion that clouds judgment and slows reactions during crucial hunting moments. Old wounds ache with weather changes, serving as biological barometers that predict storms with painful accuracy. Recent injuries throb with each movement, creating distraction when concentration becomes most vital for survival. The cumulative effect reduces successful kills to temporary relief from suffering rather than genuine triumph. Your memory shows increasing gaps and inconsistencies that could prove fatal in an environment where forgotten details mean death. Misremembering prey behavior patterns leads to failed hunts and wasted energy. Forgetting the location of rival territorial boundaries triggers conflicts you're no longer equipped to win. The cognitive tools that enabled survival begin betraying you when reliability becomes most crucial. Seasonal food shortages impact your declining hunting efficiency with devastating effect. Fat reserves that once carried you through lean periods become impossible to accumulate when successful kills grow increasingly rare. Starvation becomes a constant presence that weakens you gradually, making each subsequent hunt more difficult and less likely to succeed in an accelerating cycle of decline. Your territorial displays lose intimidating effect as physical deterioration becomes obvious to potential challengers who possess keen instincts for detecting weakness. Roars that once warned rivals away now sound hollow and desperate to ears trained to identify vulnerability. Scent markers carry chemical signatures that advertise declining health to any predator capable of interpreting the biological information correctly. The breeding imperative creates internal conflicts that tear at sanity as genetic programming demands reproductive attempts that rational survival calculations clearly indicate will accelerate your death. Hormonal changes cloud judgment precisely when clear thinking becomes most crucial for survival. The drive to continue your genetic line wars constantly with knowledge that mating displays will exhaust resources needed for personal survival. Pack hunters begin viewing you as potential prey rather than competition to avoid, fundamentally altering the strategic landscape of your territory in ways that cannot be countered through traditional dominance displays. Species that once maintained respectful distance now calculate whether coordinated attacks might succeed against your diminished capabilities. The transformation from apex predator to potential victim happens gradually, but becomes apparent to intelligent enemies. Your hunting grounds require constant defense against encroachment from multiple directions, while your patrol capabilities diminish and threats multiply exponentially. Younger predators test boundaries with increasing boldness. Probing for signs that decline has reached the point where direct challenges might succeed. The territory representing your life's work becomes a burden you can barely carry. Environmental changes accelerate beyond your ability to adapt, creating challenges with no precedent in accumulated experience. New plant growth alters sight lines and scent trail patterns, obsoleting decades of hunting knowledge. Migration route shifts disrupt territorial strategies that took years to develop and perfect. The world transforms around you while your capacity for transformation fails through exhaustion and injury. Your legacy consists entirely of brief periods when offspring survive long enough to face identical impossible challenges in the same unforgiving ecosystem. Knowledge accumulated through suffering dies with you, defended territory returns to contested status, and the cycle begins again with fresh participants who must learn every lesson independently through their own pain and loss. The realization crystallizes with brutal clarity that you are not experiencing temporary difficulties that will eventually improve. This represents the fundamental nature of existence for your species. There is no retirement phase, no period of reduced pressure, no safe haven where demands ease. The intensity you're experiencing represents baseline standards that must be maintained until death provides the only available escape. Mathematical certainty of eventual defeat hangs over every decision and action, creating psychological burdens that grow heavier with each passing season. You continue fighting not because victory remains possible, but because the alternative means immediate death, rather than the delayed conclusion that awaits regardless of effort invested. The difference between surrender and persistence becomes purely temporal rather than substantive. Your body betrays you in fresh ways each morning, presenting new limitations and pain sources that must be incorporated into survival calculations already stretched beyond sustainability. Joints that once moved smoothly now grind bone against bone with each step. Muscles that once responded instantly now require conscious effort to coordinate properly. The biological machine carrying your consciousness deteriorates beyond hope of repair. Yet despite understanding the hopelessness of your situation with crystalline clarity, some primal drive continues pushing you forward into each day's impossible challenges. Whether this represents courage, instinct, or simple biological programming becomes irrelevant when facing reality in a world systematically designed through millions of years of evolution to test every aspect of your being beyond all breaking points. The forest continues its ancient rhythms around you, with complete indifference to individual struggles and utter unconcern for personal survival. Fresh eggs hatch somewhere in the distance, beginning cycles anew with creatures destined to face identical impossible challenges you've endured throughout your existence. The wheel turns regardless of suffering, grinding forward with mechanical precision that reduces entire lives to data points. The endless march of time becomes your most relentless enemy, stripping away capabilities with surgical precision while leaving your survival requirements unchanged. Each dawn brings fresh evidence of deterioration, slower reflexes, cloudier thinking, muscles that respond with hesitation where once they exploded into action. Your body becomes a failing fortress under siege, with defenses crumbling faster than they can be repaired. The young predators emerging from their own brutal childhoods arrive with advantages you remember possessing but can never reclaim. Their reflexes fire with lightning precision. Their endurance seems limitless. Their healing happens overnight where yours takes weeks. They study your movements with calculating eyes, noting every hesitation, cataloging each sign of weakness for future exploitation. They represent everything you once were and can never be again. Your hunting strategies, refined through decades of trial and error, become predictable death sentences as prey species adapt to counter your known techniques. The ambush points that served you well for years now attract the attention of herbivores who post extra sentries specifically to watch for your approach. Your success breeds the conditions for future failure, as every kill teaches potential victims how to avoid becoming your next meal. The forest floor becomes a minefield of memories where each familiar landmark triggers recollections of past victories that now seem like fever dreams. The fallen log where you made your first adult kill. The clearing where you defeated your strongest rival. The stream where you once drank without fear of interruption. These places mock your current limitations with reminders of capabilities that time has stolen forever. Your territorial markers fade faster than you can refresh them, creating gaps in your defensive perimeter that rivals exploit with mathematical precision. The scent posts that once declared your dominance now advertise your inability to maintain proper boundaries. Each fading marker represents another piece of your life's work dissolving into irrelevance as younger, stronger competitors move to claim what you can no longer defend. Sleep deprivation compounds every other challenge through biochemical warfare waged by your own nervous system. Stress hormones flood your bloodstream during rest periods, preventing the deep sleep necessary for physical recovery. Your brain processes threats even during unconsciousness, turning dreams into tactical simulations of death and defeat that leave you more exhausted upon waking than when you first closed your eyes. So there you have it, the absolute nightmare that was being born as a Carnotaurus. From the moment you cracked out of that shell, your entire existence was nothing but a relentless gauntlet of suffering, starvation, and inevitable defeat. Every stage of life brought fresh horrors that made the previous phase seem like paradise by comparison. And the most twisted part? This wasn't some cosmic accident or cruel twist of fate. This was evolution's design, perfected over millions of years to create the ultimate survival test that